Thanks so much, Mimi, for that introduction and for running through all of those housekeeping items. Hi, everyone. My name's Maddie, and I'll be your presenter for today. Welcome to today's Energy Star webinar, Using Benchmarking Results to Understand Your Building's Performance. This is the second webinar in our three-part series on the role of EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool in facilitating successful benchmarking law compliance. If you have already attended part one of our series, welcome back. If you are curious to view that and you were not in attendance, I'll send the link in the chat to our most popular recorded webinars where we have that part one recording, and you can view it after today. All right, so we'll get started by going over a brief schedule. So last month in part one, we focused on the basics of the benchmarking ordinance reporting processes and using Portfolio Manager. Today, however, we'll focus on how to review and make sense of those benchmarking results, and will help you start charting your path towards an energy management plan. And in May, in that third installation of this series, we'll explore the development of strategies for improving your building's energy performance, and we'll go into more depth on that in part three. So if you are already familiar with the Portfolio Manager tool, then a lot of the content in this presentation might feel a bit familiar. Today, we're really geared towards folks with limited experience using the tool and really going over some of the basics. So with that, we'll get into today's learning objectives. So today you will learn how to understand your benchmarking results in Portfolio Manager by focusing on your key metrics that are available. You'll also learn how to continue benchmarking over time and how to update your data. And then we'll learn how to interpret your results and use that data to start moving towards your energy management plan. So at the outset of this, it is important to note that each jurisdiction does have different requirements for compliance, and you can use Portfolio Manager benchmarking results in different ways. Today in this webinar, we're not going to address metrics used by any one specific local or state government, but rather we'll present more general information on how Portfolio Manager benchmarking results can be interpreted once you have reported that data for compliance. And kind of on that note, we just wanted to put this slide up for those who've attended part one. This is familiar to you. But it is important to reiterate, these are the types of questions that we typically get at the EPA. The ones we can help you with are on the left, and then the questions that should be directed to your local jurisdiction are on the right. So just keep this in mind. I know a lot of us have attended part one, so I won't go through the whole spiel here, but just keep this in mind when you are asking your questions of who you're directing it to. Okay, so with that kind of disclaimer made, we will get into our first learning objective, which is understanding the various benchmarking results and the metrics that you'll get after you enter your property level data into the Portfolio Manager tool. And before we dive into this learning objective, actually, I'm just going to say real quick, today's webinar will include a few live demonstrations in Portfolio Manager. So if you're interested in following along to kind of gain that hands-on experience, I would recommend opening up Portfolio Manager in your own browser, making sure you have remembered your password and that you can log in so we can do all of those steps together. The demo's not now, but I just wanted to preface that so you can get everything set up. Okay. So with that, let's dive in to our first objective. So once you have entered your data and your into your property record, and you've generated your metrics like that 1 to 100 Energy Star score, that's really meant to be the beginning of your larger energy management plan. So this chart is based on EPA's guidelines for energy management in commercial buildings. The guidelines are a comprehensive 7-step roadmap to help you reduce the energy use and the costs in your building over time. So if you've started benchmarking recently to comply with your local law, you're probably here in the step of assessing your performance and setting your goals. And that is a good thing because the benchmarking results that you collect from Portfolio Manager are going to be very informative in developing your energy performance goals. And those are the steps captured kind of in this circle chart on the bottom of the diagram where you're evaluating your progress. So once you have your goals and a plan in place, implementing that action plan and actually working towards more ambitious energy goals, that's where your true energy and cost savings are going to be realized. Right there. So through an effective energy management strategy, all of the buildings can achieve those energy and cost savings while benefiting the environment because you're decreasing the greenhouse gas emissions that your buildings are emitting. And Portfolio Manager was designed with the intention of helping you get to that point. So if you are attending today, it is probably, if I would take a guess, because you have a local or state government requirement to benchmark your building using the EPA's Portfolio Manager. And while you may be focused right now on complying with this mandate, we do just want to make sure that you don't lose sight of the opportunity really that comes with using this tool on an ongoing and regular basis. So we just have a few benefits listed on the slide here, and we're just going to go over a few of them to keep in mind, kind of to iterate that this isn't a one and done process, but rather it can be an ongoing performance check. So one benefit is maintaining a central repository for all of your energy, water, and waste data, because you can put all of that into the tool. You can also set goals using your benchmarking data and use the tools associated with Portfolio Manager to calculate and then report on the environmental and cost benefits of actually achieving those goals. Another benefit is that you can easily share your goals and your energy savings data with other entities, whether that's inside your organization with your colleagues or outside of your organization using the sharing functionality. And then you can also tailor your reports, your data visualizations, and your metrics to meet your unique needs. All right, and then a final benefit is that Portfolio Manager offers the users hundreds and hundreds of metrics. Some of them are listed on the slide here. These are the most popular ones, but they are the energy consumption, the water consumption, and your greenhouse gas emissions, wasted materials, and the unique 1 to 100 Energy Star score. So there are, we have source and site energy, weather normalized energy, all these different types of metrics. I do just want to touch quickly on that 1 to 100 Energy Star score. So this is a percentile ranking of your building compared to similar buildings nationwide. So this was developed over 15 years ago now, and it was designed to offer context for assessing the relative performance of a building compared to its peers, so compared to similar buildings nationwide. And it's one simple number that can be understood by all of your stakeholders of that property. So on this scale of 50 would represent median performance, If a building had a score of 62, for example, that means that the property performs better than 62% of its peers. And if you have a score of a 75, that means the property is in the 25th percentile, so it performs better than 75% of similar buildings nationwide. And 75, I'll just note, is the minimum score required to earn Energy Star certification. This presentation is not on Energy Star certification. That is a different, separate voluntary program, but I just wanted to mention that here, that is the minimum score. So for you, what does this score mean? We like to recommend that you think of the Energy Star score almost as an indicator rather than like a diagnosis of your building. So it's not going to pinpoint exactly why your score is at a certain level or why two buildings have two different scores. And it's not going to identify what specific steps you need to take to improve the performance of a building. But what it's really designed to do is to help start conversations about your energy management and to elevate your energy performance as a priority for the decision makers associated with that property, especially if your property turns out to not be doing as well as you originally thought. So this slide just lays out things that the score will do for you and things that might need further action. Now, in terms of the score, this score can apply to a number of property types listed here. So these property types are the ones that are eligible for the score. They are eligible because there's robust reference data for these space types where the EPA has found meaningful relationships between the space types and how they use the energy. So when you enter a property in Portfolio Manager as one of these space types, your data can be compared to that reference data set to generate that Energy Star score. So if you don't see a particular space type on this list, that means that an Energy Star score for that type is not available. So common examples of that would include museums, libraries, police stations, and convention centers. But it is important to keep in mind that while there is no score for these property types, their performance over time can still be tracked in Portfolio Manager using other metrics like weather normalized energy use, for example. And then we do have an document that gives a little more detail on score eligibility. I will send that in the chat for you to peruse on your own end. There we go. All right. Now, a big question we get is, what if my property is not eligible to receive that 1 to 100 Energy Star score? Well, even without that score, benchmarking in Portfolio Manager can still allow you to capture some valuable annualized building metrics like energy use intensity. This is also known as EUI, and it's one of the most valuable tools that you can use to assess your building's performance. So it's defined as the energy use per square foot at a property, and it's a metric that allows us to compare differently sized buildings against each other. So in the Portfolio Manager tool, the EUI is calculated by total energy used by the building in a year by the total gross floor area of that building. So for example, the example we have here, a school and a restaurant might use the same amount of energy in a year, but the school is 50,000 square feet, while the restaurant is only 10,000 square feet. So while they consume that same amount of energy, that 7.5 million kBTU in that year, the smaller restaurant that's 5 times smaller than the school is far more energy intensive. Okay, so we encourage you to check out our short video that we have developed on EUI at that link I sent at the beginning of the chat, sorry, at the beginning of the presentation. In that short video, we also dive into comparing EUI across your portfolio and assessing EUI performance of your building and the national median of your building's property type. So there's that video on EUI. So now that we've gone over EUI, now we can look at an example in practice. So in this example, we consider portfolio manager benchmarking data from an actual city in Indiana. This is a real life example. It had 12 fire stations. So the fire department, was given a small budget for energy efficiency improvements. So they couldn't make every upgrade needed at every station, obviously, because they had a limited budget. So what was the best way to allocate this limited budget? Would it be to spread the money out evenly over the 12 stations? Or would it be to make upgrades to the oldest stations only? How do they prioritize which upgrades to make? So before making any funding decisions, the department benchmarked the station's energy use in Portfolio Manager. And even though fire stations aren't eligible for that 1 to 100 score, they did determine that the energy use intensity, that EUI that we were just talking about, would be a pretty valuable point of comparison. And this is what we found, is this graph on the screen here. The 12 fire stations had vastly different energy usage profiles, and the benchmarking in Portfolio Manager enabled the town to do a few things. First, they could uncover inefficiencies they didn't even know about in the poorer performing properties, even if those weren't necessarily the older properties. And they were able to prioritize where to focus that limited budget and where to spend that money on those energy efficiency upgrades. So based on this chart, you can see that the gray bars, fire stations 11, 9, and 12, would be those priority points for them because they have the higher EUIs. They could also identify the best practices in the better performing properties. So in these green fire stations on the left, they could identify the best practices at those fire stations and apply them to and almost replicate those best practices in their other fire stations, almost as like low-hanging fruit opportunities. So by using the portfolio manager tool consistently, they could verify whether those changes they made were having an impact over time to see if those changes were actually working. So this example is just one example of how valuable EUI can be as that starting point, and it's just one metric. So a note for anyone benchmarking a single building, just real quick, you can compare your EUI against the national median for your property type and benchmark against that value. So important to keep in mind that example. All right. So it's also important to note that energy use in EUI does not adjust or normalize for building operations the way that the 1 to 100 score does. However, energy use metrics can still be pretty valuable, and there are a couple of variations to be aware of. So for instance, you can use EUI instead of total energy consumption when you are comparing properties that have two different sizes. You could also use site and source EUI as well. So site EUI is the energy that you're using at the building, at your property, and what you see on your bill, while the source EUI is what you see on your bill and what's going on at your property, plus any energy losses that are occurring in the generation step and the transmission step in the energy life cycle. You can also use weather normalized EUI when you track the performance of a single building or a portfolio of buildings over time to address normal variations in weather from year to year. And then finally, you can use the national median EUI to assess how your property is performing compared to others nationwide. And this can be a valuable option if you are not eligible to receive that 1 to 100 score for your property, but you still want to know how your property is stacking up to others. And I'll note that this national median calculation does not account for differences in operating parameters the way that the 1 to 100 score does. Okay, so as we close out this section, the primary takeaway is really that whether or not your properties are eligible to get that 1 to 100 score, your benchmarking can still enable all of the important energy management activities that you see here on this slide, which include understanding your individual building's performance, seeing performance over time, comparing that performance across a wider portfolio of buildings, identifying problems, and tracking the impact of energy saving measures over a longer period of time. And with all of this information on the EUI metric, it's important not to forget your emissions. So Portfolio Manager can help you calculate the greenhouse gas impacts of the energy consumption that is required to operate your property. So these include your direct emissions or scope 1 emissions. That would be the energy that was provided to you in its raw form for combustion at your property. This would be like natural gas and fuel oil, things like that. There's also indirect emissions or scope 2. This would be the energy that was already produced somewhere else. So like at a power plant and then delivered to you as a secondary product. So think here like electricity, district steam, things like that. So greenhouse gas emissions from these sources reflect that initial combustion of the raw fuel, as well as the greenhouse gas emissions from transmission and the distribution between the generation site and your property. Now, for those who are familiar with the greenhouse gas accounting methodology, Portfolio Manager currently reflects a location-based approach to greenhouse gas emissions calculations, and that's based on grid average emissions factors. So there is a additional tool called the Building Emissions Calculator that allows you to ingest information from your Portfolio Manager account that calculates emissions, not just using Portfolio Manager's location-based approach, but it also takes a market-based approach with those custom emissions factors. And it will also contain forecasting features that can allow you to chart out future emissions targets. All right. So now that we've talked about those key metrics that can come from benchmarking in Portfolio Manager, we'll spend a few minutes on data accuracy and maintaining your data in Portfolio Manager. So we did touch on this a little bit during the first webinar in this series, specifically the importance of reviewing your data for accuracy before you submit it to your state or local jurisdiction with that data quality checker. But if you're benchmarking on a regular basis, then we do have a number of tools to help keep track of changes to things like property use details to help avoid making errors. So at this point, we will dive into our live demo. So I'll share my screen. And could one of the hosts just let me know if they can see it and if it's big enough on the screen?
Yeah, that looks really good, Maddie. I think maybe zoom in a little more. Yeah, that's great.
Cool. And just for folks' awareness, we are using a demo account here. So these properties are all test properties, but it should look the same as how your accounts look on your end. So the features that we're going to review in the next few minutes are really designed for users with hundreds or thousands of properties in their portfolios who might find it a little bit tricky to keep all of these properties organized for your, routine metrics, updates, and things like that. So in the Portfolio Manager homepage, the first thing we'll do is look at using groups and views. So this dashboard lists all of your existing properties, and this feature allows you to add, edit, and delete groups. So from here, you can, if you click on this blue text, you can manage all of the groups that you've created. And then once you save your changes, that will affect your view in your dashboard. You can create a new group by clicking the blue Create a Group button. You can name that group, and you can select the properties to add to that group. Now, when you select your properties, you can filter by a number of things like property type, construction status, state, and other things. So, for example, if you wanted to view all of your properties that were in this example, DC, you could select that, and this group applies to those properties. Well, maybe we should select them first. There you go. Yeah, so then you select the properties by clicking on these checkboxes, and then if you want to select all of them, you'll click this checkbox on top. You can preview your selection by clicking the View Selection text at the top there, and just double checking. So it might be useful to name your group to apply to the filter that you used when you were selecting your properties. And you can specify whether or not you want that to be your default view in Portfolio Manager. So we'll create that. And then when we click on this drop-down menu, we can specify that we just want to see that group that we just created. And it will filter all of the properties for that. Now, you might be wondering how to change or edit these metrics next to the actual name of those properties. And that is when we do that by creating the property views. And that by clicking on this text here, we can create a new view by clicking the Create New View blue button. You will name your view, obviously something that represents the metrics that you're going to be using. You'll select the time frame for your view, so either the current energy year or the baseline year. And then you'll select your metrics. So you can select up to 3 metrics to display on that dashboard. Some popular ones are the Energy Star score, that EUI, the EUI that we were just talking about is another popular one. And you could also do property, really any metric that you prefer. So you'll select your metrics that you want to display on your dashboard, save your view, and then we can select which view to look at. And we see that the ones we just selected, so score, EU, and both EUIs appear. All right. One other little trick here that you can do is there is a sorting icon at the top of each of these columns, and these provide an at-a-glance look at your portfolio's performance, especially if you wanted to sort from small to large on your Energy Star score, for example, or your EUIs. All right, so it is normal that your property use details, like the number of occupants or your weekly operating hours, will change over time. And if that is the case, you would want to update that new information to track that the value has changed over time. So when you update your value, you will indicate the date that the new value took effect so that the tool can account for this. And the key difference here is that you're updating the value to reflect how it currently is rather than how it was when you entered it in, if that makes sense. So we will do a quick demo of how to update that information in your property. So let's go into the demo. Okay. All right. So let's say we have this example office, and if we go to the details tab, you can see all of the property uses and use details. You can click the action drop-down menu to edit those use details to update it with the new information. So for this specific example, we're going to say that we have 80,000 square feet of building use and 20,000 square feet of vacant office use. And we're going to say in this example that the 20,000 square feet of vacant space recently became occupied. Okay, so we want to update that information to reflect 0 square feet of vacant space. All right, so we will edit those use details and we can first, since the only metric we're changing here is the gross floor area, we will want to change the value to 0 square feet, right? Because that vacant space just became occupied. And we would change that current as of date to whenever that change happened. So let's say that it became occupied in January 1st of this year, then we would indicate that. Since this is vacant space, we will not be editing any of the other use details since they should remain the same. But now that we've made that change to the vacant space, because there is no longer any vacant space in this use type, we see this red exclamation point in both the property gross floor area for the buildings and the property gross floor area that is self-reported. The actual gross floor area of this property is 100,000 square feet. That is what you entered in when you actually create the property. This number, which is listed below your table of uses, is a time-weighted sum of all of your use spaces. So right now it indicates 80,000 square feet because we removed the 20,000 square feet of vacant space. So what do we have to do? To correct this error, we should adjust the actual building use to reflect that that 20,000 square feet of vacant space has become occupied. So we'll do a very similar methodology. We'll use the action drop-down menu. I want to edit use details. And then for the gross floor area, we will change that value to 100,000 square feet because the entire office is now occupied. And again, we will change that current as of date to January 1st of 2024 because that is when we were assuming the office became fully occupied. And always save those changes. All right. So now that we've made that change, that that red exclamation point is gone and the two property gross floor areas match. So Portfolio Manager does have a few of these different checks and alerts to help you identify and fix those kinds of errors that might occur as you're updating your information in Portfolio Manager. So one other similar alert that we see is with the energy data. So if there are issues with the meter data at your property, then you'll see the red exclamation point on the property level energy tab. And from here, you can drill down into the affected meter to review and correct that issue. So If we scroll down, well, first you see the red exclamation point on the actual energy tab, indicating that there is an alert here that needs to be addressed. If we scroll down, you can see the red exclamation point next to the actual meter name. And then if we click on that, there are a number of alerts, this time in a yellow yield sign, that indicate what errors there might be. So the alerts are both shown here at the top of the page, but also right below the row that needs to be edited. And to address these alerts, you'll simply click into the table to make those changes, to make sure in this case that there is consistent data throughout the year. I will say you are still able to move on from this page even if you have not addressed those alerts. However, you won't be able to apply for Energy Star certification with this alert left unresolved. And if any gaps and overlaps exist in a meter, you will also see a red exclamation mark on that meter's tab header, as we saw earlier. All right. So I'm just going to keep that as is. Now, we are going to touch real quick on a feature that we went over last time, but it is still useful to recommend. And this is the data quality checker, which can help identify erroneous or anomalous data. And it reviews all of your entries for your property for any given 12-month period to identify your problems with the meter data, property use details, and property information. So from your summary tab, you will scroll down, and under the data quality checker, you'll check for possible errors. And then you'll select a year ending date that represents a full 12 months of meter consumption information. Yep. And then you can click Run Checker. If you get a green thumbs up, that means there are no issues with your data. A yellow yield sign and the exclamation point indicates atypical data. So for example, unusually high or low values or no water or waste data. And if you receive any alerts like this, you want to double check that the information is correct, but you can still move on. And then if you have any red stop signs, that indicates that there is missing or incomplete data. And that will likely prevent your metrics from calculating, and you should resolve that issue as soon as you can. Thankfully, though, Portfolio Manager does indicate what to do. If you have that red stop sign, we just got a question in for how to get to the data quality checker. I'll go over that real quick. So if you're in your property record, from the summary tab, you can scroll down about halfway. I think it's the third box down. There's a data quality checker, and you simply click check for possible errors. A good question. So it's just a good idea to use this before you submit for compliance. It'll help you double check that all of your data is actually complete. And yep, highly recommend using that. Okay. So that actually completes our second objective, our learning objective for today, but we're going to stay in Portfolio Manager because I want to show you all one more thing before we wrap up for today. And this next learning objective section, we're going to walk through a couple of example scenarios as well to help you start to get kind of an intuitive sense for how your metrics and changes in your metrics can help begin to inform the development of your own energy management strategy. So again, that first step to actually, I'll go back to the slides real quick because this is some pretty valuable information on the slides here. There we go. So your first step is to make your plan. And these are just some high level considerations that we want you to keep in mind as you start on this journey of translating benchmarking information into action. So, the first thing is to prioritize your buildings and ask yourself if you own multiple buildings, which ones you should focus on first. You'll also want to sequence your low and no cost O&M measures ahead of those more capital intensive retrofits. So kind of going for that low hanging fruit first. You might want to focus on optimizing the operations of your current building system before you go out and buy more expensive upgrades. The next consideration to take is to look at the various time horizons that are existing in your own organization. So, like the current budget cycle, what can you do in this current cycle versus the next cycle? And what are you going to be doing more longer term? So, those more comprehensive efforts. It's just important to set those both small and long term goals. And then finally, our fourth consideration here is setting those property or portfolio-wide goals for energy performance. And these concepts, as well as a few others, are discussed in our other Energy Star resources, like we've linked here on the slide, our Buildings Upgrade Manual. And we will go over how to set those carbon reduction goals in a few moments. So one of the great things that Portfolio Manager can help you do early on is set goals for your property. And this is where we will start back up the screen share. There we go. So in this Portfolio Manager tool, you can establish either one baseline and target for all of your properties, or set different baselines and targets for each individual property. And to set the same baseline and target for all of your properties, you will start in the My Portfolio tab and scroll down to the Manage Portfolio box on the left-hand side. And again, we're starting with setting the same baseline and target for all of your properties. So we are going to select the fourth icon down, which says Set a Portfolio Baseline and/or Target. And that brings us to this page, and it does specify at the top here that this is for all of your properties. And if you decide to select a baseline year, it just gives a brief description for what that definition is, and you can specify the month and the year for that baseline. You can also let Portfolio Manager automatically set those baselines, and that will be the earliest eligible 12-month period for which your property has complete data for. And then you can also leave your property specific baselines as currently set. And you can do this both for energy, water, and waste. You can also set your energy target, which can either be a target Energy Star score or a percentage better than a baseline or median source EUI. And once you've filled in all of that information, you will select Save Baselines and Target. So if you decide not to set the same baselines and targets for all of your properties, you can set individual ones for each property by navigating to a specific property and navigate to the Goals tab within that property record. And then you'll scroll down and there's a specific box to set your baselines or target. On this tab, I'll also point out the progress towards your targets and your goals. So you can set these goals for the specific property based on your target Energy Star score, or again, that percentage better than the EUI. And Portfolio Manager will calculate the benefits of reaching that goal based on where you are now. So this goal setting functionality in Portfolio Manager is really a good way to help you quantify the benefits of an increased Energy Star score or a reduced EUI. All right. So up until now, we've been working primarily out of this My Portfolio tab, but we also have a number of resources available for you to help track your progress in the Reporting tab. So we'll go there now. And this Reporting tab was designed with the intention that benchmarking can only drive action if your data is easily accessed and also interpreted. So there are 4 features here to help see and interpret the building performance across a few different metrics. So we have our Energy Star performance documents over on the right here. We have our charts and graphs as well. And then below we have the standard Energy Star reports, and we have the custom reporting templates. Now, while understanding that the 1 to 100 score is not a specific prescription for what to do next, there are ways that you can use the score in a combination with other information to map out a plan that improves your property's energy performance over time. And we're going to go over a few examples that demonstrate just this in a second. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen and go to slide 41. Awesome. Okay. So for this first example, we have an office building that was designed and built to be a high performance building. But a few years into its operation, the EUI is still right around the national median for the property types. So that the EUI might have decreased, but it is still in line with that national median. And we're not seeing too many improvements with that comparison. So we actually see this a lot with newer buildings that are designed to be quote unquote green. And with your own benchmarking data, you can help identify when those high performance buildings aren't performing as they would have been expected. So even your state of the art building systems and design elements may not be able to deliver superior energy performance if those building systems are not operating as intended. And in this case, one potential next step could be to investigate recommissioning or commissioning the building as well. So this second example that we see a lot is that the property's Energy Star score is still a 35, even after paying careful attention to their operations and maintenance. Now, in this case, there we go. Based on the benchmarking data we see here with that stagnant score, the building has reached its limit in terms of the benefits it's going to reap from the O&M. So it might indicate that the property could benefit from a larger retrofit project, kind of push that needle forward on their energy performance. This again is a larger project, so if you are looking for assistance on that, you can reach out to your local utility to help kind of pinpoint what the best measures are and what those next steps should be. And since these larger retrofit projects do tend to be more costly than those initial O&M, then they can also help. They might have some incentives to help lower that cost. All right. So let's move on to our third example, which is that the property is scoring above a 75. Now, in this case, congratulations. You might consider applying for Energy Star certification to celebrate and be recognized for your success. However, you're still going to want to make sure that you're continuing to implement your energy management plan and O&M plan so that you don't start to see your performance slip as well, because um, again, this is an ongoing process and you're going to want to make sure that you're continuing with your plan. And if you have a portfolio of properties, you'll also want to consider how these practices that benefited one property can benefit all of the other properties that might not be performing as well, like we saw in that first firehouse example earlier in the presentation, with using those best practices to help reduce the EUI at those more energy intensive properties. All right, so with those three examples, we do have some compliance specific resources that we covered in today's training. The first here is just a quick video that condenses kind of the mechanics of complying with your state and local benchmarking ordinances. And if you recall back to the third or fourth slide, we do want to emphasize that any questions that you have about your deadlines and what buildings should be submitted, any fines, extensions, confirmation of receipt that you submitted your data, things like that. Those questions should all be directed towards your state or local jurisdiction. And then finally, Energy Star has published a series of a ton of frequently asked questions that are specific to complying with your state and local benchmarking requirements. So if you do have questions related to Portfolio Manager and actually submitting your data, then you can start here. And we can help you with the basics of using Portfolio Manager, the Portfolio Manager metrics like Energy Star score, those alerts and data quality checks that we went over today, and also how to connect with other users. And that brings us to the end of today's presentation. So just to recap, today we covered understanding your benchmarking results in Portfolio Manager. We looked at maintaining accurate data and updating our use details, and we used benchmarking data to improve our energy performance over time. Okay, so we hope that you enjoyed today's webinar and that you will join us for the next and final session, part 3, which is to efficiency and beyond, how to benefit from benchmarking compliance with strategies for improving your energy performance on May 8th. We also have a ton of other extra help resources for you. So we have our buildings help desk. In addition to those state and local benchmarking FAQs, we have a full extensive list of other FAQs. And if you have any questions or comments about your specific property, you can submit a question to our help desk. And I think that brings us to the end of today's presentation. Yep. And so we can end the recording here. Thanks, folks, for staying on till the end of the main presentation. We'll now take a few minutes to go over some of the questions that you submitted throughout today's slideshow.